"Look, she has drugs in her bag," the flight attendant announced to the entire first-class cabin, pointing to the only black woman on the plane while holding up the small package like an evidence at a trial. "This passenger brought illegal substances onto this aircraft," she said boldly. The humiliation was public, the accusation was loud, and everyone had their phones out, recording every second of what would become the most viewed flight incident of the year. A few minutes later, as the airport security escorted the elegant black woman down the aisle for further investigation, she leaned in close to the smirking flight attendant and whispered words that sent chills down her spine. "You have no idea what you've just done." The flight attendant had no way of knowing she just framed a top CIA operative. No way of knowing that her career, her freedom, and her carefully constructed life were about to come crashing down. If you've ever been wrongly accused or witnessed someone being mistreated because of their race, you're going to want every minute of this shocking story. Subscribe and type in the comments where you're watching from if you believe justice should always prevail, because what happens next is something you absolutely need to see. 12 hours before that fateful confrontation, Crystal Cole was doing what she'd done for 15 years at the CIA, preparing meticulously for her mission. At 38, Crystal had broken through every barrier placed before her: gender, race, and the old boys network of intelligence officers who never thought a black woman from Southside Chicago would outrank them all. Crystal wasn't just any agent. She was the newly appointed head of the CIA's Covert Aviation Security Division, handpicked by Director Reynolds himself after her unprecedented success rate in the Eastern European counterterrorism operation that saved thousands of lives but never made the news. As she packed her carry-on in her hotel room that morning, her secure phone lit up with Director Reynolds' name. "The airline's CEO has been briefed on your cover," he told her. "No one else knows. As far as the flight crew is concerned, you're just another first-class passenger. Your real mission, to identify the drug smuggling operation we've tracked to this airline, remains classified at the highest level." What made Crystal exceptional wasn't just her analytical mind or her perfect service record. It was something you couldn't teach, an almost supernatural awareness of her surroundings. Throughout her career, she demonstrated an ability to notice things others missed, to sense threats before they materialized. As she moved through the crowded terminal that morning, Crystal was already working. Without breaking stride, she caught a falling child whose mother had turned away for just a moment. She noted the outdated security badge on a maintenance worker, the whispered conversation between two TSA agents who should have been watching the scanner. Each observation was quietly logged in her specialized phone app, designed to look like a social media platform, but actually a secure CIA documentation system. Crystal's primary mission today was to observe flight crews, specifically, to identify which crew members were involved in moving high-value drugs across state lines using commercial aircraft. And one name had been flagged in her briefing: Megan Parker. While Crystal Cole was assessing security weaknesses, flight attendant Megan Parker was rushing through the employee entrance, flashing a practiced smile at the security guard who noted she was late again. At 32, Megan projected an image of success: designer watch, perfect manicure, highlights that cost more than a car payment. But beneath the polished exterior was a woman drowning in credit card debt, bitter about being passed over for promotion and harboring a growing resentment toward the changing world around her. "First class isn't what it used to be," she muttered to her colleague Tyler after reviewing the passenger manifest. "Letting just anyone with money up there these days." Tyler's uncomfortable laugh barely masked his discomfort at Megan's meaning. It wasn't the first time she'd made such comments. especially when seeing names that suggested passengers might be people of color. Megan had once believed her blonde hair, blue eyes, and picture-perfect smile would guarantee her advancement. When Alyssa Johnson, a black woman with fewer years but higher customer satisfaction ratings, received the senior position Megan had coveted, something hardened inside her. "It's all about quotas now," she'd complain to anyone who would listen. "They just want diversity hires." What her colleagues didn't know, what no one knew, was that Megan's resentment had evolved into something far more dangerous. 6 months ago, desperate to maintain her facade of success despite mounting debts, she'd accepted an offer from a first-class passenger. A simple transaction: move certain packages through security using her crew credentials and access. The money was good, too good to refuse. Now, in the airport bathroom before her flight, Megan was on the phone with her contact, voice hushed. "I told you, I'll make the drop this trip. The package is secure. No, I'm not backing out. Do you know how much credit card debt I'm in?" She glanced around nervously before opening her makeup bag to reveal a small, vacuum-sealed package nestled among her cosmetics. High-grade pharmaceuticals bound for the black market. Worth thousands on the street. Worth enough to keep Megan's creditors at bay for another month. As Megan joined her crew, her mask of professionalism firmly back in place, she had no idea that today's flight would bring her face to face with someone specifically trained to see through such facades. As Crystal Cole settled into her first-class seat, Megan Parker prepared the cabin for boarding. Crystal's trained eyes missed nothing. She observed how Megan's demeanor subtly shifted when interacting with different passengers. The warm smile and attentive service for the white male CEO, the friendly banter with the elderly white couple, and then the cool, barely professional acknowledgement when she reached Crystal's seat. "Anything to drink?" The question was clipped, the customary ma'am noticeably absent. "Sparkling water, please," Crystal replied, her voice giving away nothing of her internal assessment. When Megan practically dropped the drink on Crystal's tray while carefully placing others, Crystal made a mental note. Discrimination often reveals itself in these small, seemingly insignificant moments. But unlike most passengers, she was here specifically to document it and potentially connect it to the drug smuggling operation she was investigating. Megan felt Crystal's eyes on her, that focused attention, making her inexplicably nervous. When their gazes met briefly, Megan felt an unsettling sensation. That black woman in 3A shouldn't be on this kind of flight. She's even the only black here, she whispered to Tyler during pre-takeoff preparations. But Tyler shunned her off. As the flight progressed, Megan's plan progressed also. She needed to ensure her own safety, to eliminate any threat to her operation. And suddenly, a plan began to form in her mind. A plan that would simultaneously remove this black woman and reinforce all the racial stereotypes Megan privately believed. As the plane taxied for takeoff, high in the sky, the unfair treatment to Crystal was about to get much worse. As the plane reached its flying height, Crystal sat watching everything around her. While she looked like she was just working on her tablet, she was really watching and noting every detail. Her trained eyes missed nothing. Crystal pressed the call button above her seat. She waited 1 minute, then 5. She watched as Megan walked by many times, helping other passengers, but ignoring Crystal's lit-up button. A white man in seat 2C pressed his button. Megan was at his side in seconds, all smiles. "What can I get for you, sir?" "Just a scotch, neat, when you have a moment." "Absolutely. I'll bring that right away." The difference in treatment was very clear. When Crystal finally caught Megan's eye after the 3rd time she walked by, the flight attendant's attitude was cold. "Did you need something?" Megan's tone was flat, and she didn't say ma'am like she did with other passengers. "I requested a blanket twice. It's quite cold in this section." We've limited blankets. I'll check if there are any left. 20 more minutes passed. No blanket came. Crystal made notes about this on her phone, keeping her face calm. This wasn't just bad service. It was the kind of unfair treatment Crystal was sent to watch for, along with the drug smuggling. Meanwhile, Megan was getting more worried with each minute. The small pack of drugs hidden in her crew bag made her nervous. She was supposed to leave the package in the first-class bathroom where another passenger would pick it up. Simple. Crystal saw how Megan moved around the cabin. She noticed the flight attendant's shaky hands when serving drinks. She saw how Megan checked her crew bag too often. She heard the quiet talk with Tyler that stopped when someone else came near. These were the signs of someone doing something illegal. Crystal kept making notes on her phone, watching Megan closely. During a quiet time, Crystal saw Megan go into the first-class bathroom with her crew bag. Megan came out 2 minutes later without the bag, then went back to get it. The bag looked less full. Crystal knew a drug drop had happened. Minutes later, a well-dressed man used the same bathroom. When he came back to his seat, his jacket pocket looked fuller than before. The deal was complete, right in front of everyone. Crystal had seen enough to know her suspicions were right. Megan wasn't just unfair to certain passengers. She was moving drugs on the plane. What Crystal didn't know was how far Megan would go to protect herself when she felt threatened. This is why you need to hit subscribe right now. What happened next will shock you. During a quiet time, when most passengers were watching movies or sleeping, Megan went to the galley. With shaking hands, she reached into her personal locker, under the service area, the one place flight attendants could keep things safe during a flight. From a hidden spot in her makeup bag, she took out a second drug package, like the one she'd already delivered. This was her own payment. A small amount her supplier let her keep to sell herself. Worth thousands on the street, but now she would use it differently. Megan looked around to make sure she was alone. Insurance policy, she whispered, putting the small package in her apron pocket. What Megan didn't know was that her every move was being recorded by the tiny camera in Crystal's tie pin. The CIA uses technology much more advanced than what most people know about. As Megan got ready to serve the cabin again, she made a choice that would ruin her career and freedom. She waited until Crystal went to the bathroom, then approached her empty seat. Megan quickly looked around the cabin. Most passengers were asleep or watching their screens. Perfect. She leaned over Crystal's empty seat, pretending to fix the pillow and blanket, the very blanket she had refused to give earlier. With quick hands, Megan slipped the small package into Crystal's handbag on the seat. The trap was set. Now she just needed the right moment to find it. Crystal came back from the bathroom and noticed Megan at her seat. The flight attendant's sudden helpfulness was very different from how she'd acted all flight. "Just making sure you're comfortable?" Megan said with a fake smile. Crystal just nodded, her instincts already telling her something was wrong. As she sat down, she carefully checked everything around her but didn't see anything out of place right away. But the hidden camera in her tie pin had caught everything. The proof was safe. Megan waited 20 minutes before making her move. Crystal knew something had happened, but instead of confronting Megan right away, she kept taking notes. This was no longer just about finding drug routes. It was now about catching someone framing an innocent person. Megan went to the galley and used the airphone to call the captain. "Sir, I think a passenger in first class has illegal drugs. I saw her acting strangely, and I think we need to check her bag." The captain, following the rules for possible security threats, told Megan to check with the air marshal's help. Megan walked to Crystal's seat with another flight attendant and a man in regular clothes, the air marshal. She spoke loudly enough for everyone in first class to hear. "Excuse me, I need to check your bag right now." Crystal looked up from her tablet, keeping her face calm even though she knew what was coming. "May I ask why?" "We've received information about illegal items on this flight," Megan announced loudly. Several passengers looked up, interested in the drama. They started taking out phones to record what was happening. "I don't agree to any search of my personal things," Crystal said calmly, knowing her rights. "This isn't a request, ma'am," the air marshal said. "Under air safety rules, we can search any passenger's things if we think there might be a danger to the flight." Without waiting for Crystal to answer, Megan grabbed her handbag. With a fake look of shock, she pulled out the small package. "What is this?" she asked loudly, holding it up for everyone to see. People gasped. More phones came out to record. Crystal stayed remarkably calm, her CIA training showing in her composed manner. "That is not mine," she said firmly. "I have no idea how that got into my bag." "It was in your handbag," Megan said in an accusing tone, with emphasis that showed what she thought of Crystal. "Sir," she said to the air marshal, "this looks like prescription drugs being sold illegally." The whispers in the cabin grew louder. A woman across the aisle shook her head. "Unbelievable," she muttered, just loud enough to be heard. "And in first class too." Another passenger added, "They think money lets them get away with anything." The air marshal became more serious. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me to the back of the plane. This is very serious." Crystal stayed composed. "I understand you have rules to follow, but I want to be clear that I did not put that package in my bag. Someone else did." She looked directly at Megan, who showed a quick flash of doubt before putting on a face of righteous anger. "Are you accusing a crew member?" Megan asked loudly, playing to her audience of recording passengers. "That's ridiculous." The air marshal stepped in. "Ma'am, please come with me now. We'll figure this out on the ground with the proper authorities." As Crystal stood with dignity despite the accusing stares and whispers, she leaned close to Megan and whispered words that should have scared her. "You have no idea what you've just done." Megan's face showed a moment of uncertainty before returning to smug satisfaction. She had no way of knowing she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. The marshal walked Crystal to the back of the plane to watch her until landing. Behind her, Crystal could hear the whispers, the assumptions, the judgment. "Can't believe they let people like that in first class. Always check who's sitting next to you when you fly." Good thing they caught her before she could sell that stuff. Each comment filled with the racism, something Crystal had heard of. Even as she'd risen to become one of the CIA's top officers, she knew some people still thought that way. When the plane landed at its scheduled stop, airport security came on board to take Crystal into custody. People kept recording as she was walked off the plane, back straight, head high, dignity intact, despite what was happening. Not a single person on that plane knew they were not seeing a criminal being caught, but the start of an operation that would uncover a big drug ring. In the terminal, Megan was already showing the video to other crew members, getting congratulations for her watchfulness. Within hours, she had uploaded the edited video to social media with the caption, "Flight attendant catches drug smuggler in first class. Watch what happens next." The video would indeed go viral, but not for the reasons Megan expected. Crystal was walked through the airport by security officers. Passengers from the plane followed, phones recording her public shame. The officers stood on either side of her, guiding her firmly toward the airport security office. Once inside the small room with its plain desk and chairs, Crystal finally spoke. "I need to make a phone call," she said, her voice calm but carrying a strong sense of authority that made the officers look at each other. "Ma'am, we'll process you first, then you can," the lead officer began. "Call this number right now." Crystal slid a black card across the desk. "Tell them you have Crystal Cole in custody." Something in her voice made the officer pause. He looked at the card. A simple black background with a government seal and a phone number. No name, no agency, just the seal and digits. When the call connected, the officer identified himself and explained the situation. The change in his behavior was immediate as he listened to the voice on the other end. His back straightened. His eyes widened slightly. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Of course, sir." The mood in the room changed completely. The handcuffs were removed with hurried apologies. "Ma'am, we had no idea who you were. Ma'am, we're so sorry for the trouble. Ma'am, how can we help you now?" Crystal stayed composed, accepting their apologies with a nod. "I need a secure line to Langley and transportation, and I need the airport security videos from the last 3 hours." The officers rushed to fulfill her requests, suddenly very respectful to the woman they'd been treating as a criminal just moments before. Meanwhile, on the plane preparing for its next departure, Megan was enjoying her moment of glory. Crew members gathered around her phone as she showed them the video she'd recorded. "Did you see her face when I pulled out the drugs?" Megan laughed. "Priceless. You should send that to the company," another attendant suggested. "Might get you that promotion finally." "Already put it on social media," Megan replied smugly, "going viral as we speak." Indeed, the video was spreading quickly across the internet. Within hours, it had been viewed over 100,000 times, with the count climbing fast. Comments flooded in. "Great job catching her. Why am I not surprised who the drug dealer was? This is why I have trust issues with certain people in first class." The racist undertones in many comments went unchallenged as the video continued to spread. Megan was being called a hero by strangers who knew nothing of the truth. What none of these viral viewers knew, what Megan certainly didn't know, was that the story they thought they were sharing was about to change dramatically. The woman they were attacking wasn't just innocent. She was one of the government's top agents. And she had recorded everything. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Things are about to get intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next. While Megan's edited video was going viral, Crystal was entering CIA headquarters. She walked purposefully through security checkpoints, her ID badge giving her immediate access to areas few people even knew existed. In a secure meeting room, Director Reynolds was waiting with 2 senior analysts. "I assumed things didn't go as planned," he said as Crystal entered. "Actually, they went exactly as they should have," Crystal replied, taking off the tie pin from her jacket and connecting it to a computer. "We found a serious security problem." The large screen on the wall lit up with high-definition video from Crystal's hidden camera. The angle perfectly captured Megan adjusting her seat and finally planting the drug in Crystal's seat pocket when she went to the washroom. "This flight attendant, Megan Parker, didn't just profile me based on race and falsely accuse me," Crystal explained. "She's involved in something much more concerning." The footage continued, showing Megan in the galley passing a small package to another crew member when she thought no one was looking. The quick handoff was subtle but clear to trained eyes. "Drug smuggling," Director Reynolds stated. "Exactly," Crystal confirmed. "Based on the size and the way it was handled, likely expensive prescription drugs or cocaine, small enough to avoid detection, valuable enough to be worth the risk." The analysts were already running face recognition on the second crew member, pulling up employee files. "Tyler Jenkins," one reported. 5 years with the airline, no criminal record. "That we know of," Crystal added. "I've seen this pattern before. They target passengers based on race, assuming police will be quicker to believe accusations against people of color. When a passenger catches them in the act or becomes suspicious, they plant evidence and create a distraction." "Clever," Director Reynolds admitted. using racism as cover for criminal activity. Not just clever, effective, Crystal said. According to my initial research, Megan Parker has been involved in at least 7 incidents with passengers of color in the past year alone. Each time, the passenger was removed from the flight or detained. No charges were ever filed, but the humiliation and disruption were real. Director Reynolds said. The second analyst looked up from his computer. The airline CEO has been trying to reach you, Agent Cole. Apparently, he's personally requesting a meeting to apologize for the incident. Crystal nodded. Good. That gives us a way to involve the airline in the investigation without alerting our suspects. Director Reynolds studied the footage again. The question is how big this operation is. Is it just these 2 crew members, or is this a larger ring using commercial flights? That's what we need to find out, Crystal said, her determination clear. And we need to do it before they realize they've just tried to frame a federal agent. The director nodded. How do you want to proceed? A slight smile crossed Crystal's face. I think it's time for Miss Parker to meet her new boss. What Megan didn't realize as she enjoyed her new internet fame was that her viral moment was about to become evidence in a federal investigation. Her smug smile was about to be wiped away permanently. In the executive boardroom of Greatland Airways' headquarters, crisis management was in full swing. The viral video had reached 5 million views and was being picked up by news outlets across the country. This is a PR nightmare, the chief communications officer said, scrolling through social media reactions on her tablet. The racial implications are exploding online. We're being called everything from enablers to outright racists. The airline's CEO, Richard Hamilton, a distinguished man in his early 60s with gray hair, paced at the head of the table. How do we actually know about what happened? According to the crew report, a first-class passenger was caught carrying illegal substances, the head of customer experience explained. Standard procedure was followed. The air marshal was called, the passenger was detained at the stopover, and local authorities took over. And the passenger? Do we have her information? Hamilton asked. Crystal Cole, the CCO read from her notes. Booked a round-trip first-class ticket from D.C. to Los Angeles with the stopover in Chicago. That's where the incident occurred. Have we reached out to her? Offer any kind of apology or compensation while we investigate? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Actually, sir, the head of security finally spoke up. We've been trying, but we're hitting roadblocks. Miss Cole seems to have disappeared from the system. What do you mean disappeared? Hamilton demanded. I mean, when we try to access her contact information, we get government clearance blocks. When we called the number on her reservation, we were transferred 3 times and eventually reached someone at what sounded like a federal agency who told us Ms. Cole would contact us when appropriate. Hamilton stopped pacing. Federal agency? What federal agency? They wouldn't say, sir. The CEO's expression changed from concern to alarm. Are you telling me we might have detained a federal agent or diplomat? The tension in the room grew as everyone realized what this might mean. It gets worse, the security head continued. I pulled the security camera footage from the gate and cabin to review the incident myself. The unedited version shows clear evidence that our flight attendant planted the drugs. Gasps and murmurs erupted around the table. Show me, Hamilton demanded. The security footage played on the boardroom screen, showing in clear detail Megan's taking the drug and deliberate planting it when Crystal went to the washroom. My God, Hamilton whispered, and this person works for us? The conversation was interrupted by Hamilton's private line ringing. The CEO answered, his expression growing increasingly serious as he listened. Yes, sir. I understand. Yes, we will cooperate fully. Absolutely. Thank you for the information. When he hung up, his face had lost all color. That was the Director of Transportation Security Administration, he told the stunned room. The passenger our employee falsely accused and publicly humiliated is Crystal Cole, a senior CIA operative conducting a security assessment of our airline. The silence that followed was deafening. Apparently, Hamilton continued, what began as a routine evaluation has now evolved into a full investigation of a suspected drug smuggling operation involving our flight crew. The head of legal affairs found her voice first. What do they want us to do? They're sending Agent Cole here tomorrow morning to brief us personally, Hamilton replied. In the meantime, we are to proceed normally, issue our standard, we're investigating statement. And most importantly, not alert Flight Attendant Parker or any other crew that they're under scrutiny. As the executives absorbed this bombshell, the head of PR checked her phone and groaned. Megan Parker is scheduled for a morning show interview tomorrow. She's being painted as a hero who stopped a drug dealer. Hamilton's expression hardened with resolve. Not for long. Schedule a company-wide meeting for all available flight crews tomorrow afternoon. Tell them we're recognizing Parker's actions. Let's make sure she and any accomplices are there. Are we setting a trap? The CCO asked incredulously. We're not, Hamilton corrected, but Agent Cole is. The morning after the viral video, Megan Parker arrived at the crew entrance of Atlantic Airways feeling like a celebrity. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop with notifications. The video of her catching a drug smuggler had reached 10 million views overnight. There she is, the hero of Flight 237, called out a colleague as Megan walked into the crew lounge. Several flight attendants applauded, one even asked for a selfie with her. Megan soaked in the attention, her smile wider than it had been in months. This was what she'd always wanted, recognition, respect, admiration. The fact that it came at the expense of a black woman's dignity didn't bother her at all. The morning news wants to interview you, said Tyler, approaching with a coffee for her. They called the airline PR department. I know, Megan replied, trying to sound humble but failing. I'm doing it at 11, live from the terminal. Another flight attendant rushed over, phone in hand. Have you seen the company email? The CEO wants to meet with our entire crew this afternoon. Megan's eyes widened. The CEO? Richard Hamilton himself? The email says they want to recognize the crew of Flight 237 for outstanding service and security awareness, the colleague continued. Megan, I think you're getting a promotion. The thought of finally being recognized, of moving up to senior cabin crew, or maybe even management, made Megan's heart race. This was it. Her moment, her reward. In the bathroom mirror, Megan practiced her speech. I was just doing my job, she rehearsed, trying out different expressions of fake modesty. The safety of our passengers is always my first priority. What she didn't say, even to herself, was how good it felt to put that woman in her place. How satisfying it had been to see the shock and humiliation on her face. How right it felt to see someone like her being led away in shame. As Megan applied another coat of lipstick, her phone buzzed with a text from her drug contact. Saw the video. Not smart drawing attention. Meeting canceled this week. Megan frowned. They were worried over nothing. This attention was the perfect cover. Who would suspect the hero flight attendant of being a drug mule? She texted back. Relax. This is good for us. We'll call later. What Megan didn't know was that at that very moment, her accomplice Tyler was being followed by 2 plainclothes federal agents. Her supplier's phone was already being tapped, and the meeting she was so excited about was not at all what she imagined. If you're enjoying this story of justice being served, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe right now. The most satisfying part is still to come. As Megan primped in the mirror, rehearsing humble lines she didn't mean, the real power players were gathering in the corporate headquarters across town. And at the center of that gathering was a woman whose name the world was about to know. Crystal Cole, CIA operative and the architect of Meghan Parker's downfall. The large conference room at Atlantic Airways headquarters was filled to capacity. Flight crews from across the airline's network had been called in for what they believed was a special recognition ceremony. The room buzzed with excited conversation. In the front row, Meghan Parker sat with perfect posture, her uniform crisp, her smile wide but controlled, practicing the professional demeanor she thought befitting of someone about to be promoted. Beside her, Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Why are there security guards at the doors?" he whispered to Meghan. She barely glanced at them. "Probably because the CEO is coming. Stop being paranoid." What Meghan didn't notice was that these weren't the usual corporate security guards. These men and women had the alert eyes and ready stance of federal agents. At exactly 2 p.m., the side door opened. Richard Hamilton, CEO of Atlantic Airways, entered along with his executive team. Their faces were unusually serious for a recognition ceremony. "Good afternoon," Hamilton began, his voice lacking the warmth typically present at employee celebrations. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." Meghan sat up even straighter, ready for her moment in the spotlight. As many of you know, an incident occurred on Flight 237 yesterday that has gained significant attention on social media and news outlets, Hamilton continued. A passenger was accused of carrying illegal drugs and was removed from the aircraft. Meghan nodded along, already imagining being called to the front. "What you don't know," Hamilton's voice grew more stern, "is that this incident has revealed a serious security breach within our airline." A murmur ran through the crowd. Confusion replaced excitement. "Today, I want to introduce someone who will be heading a new joint task force between Atlantic Airways and federal authorities," Hamilton said. "This person will lead an investigation into security vulnerabilities and potential criminal activity among our staff." Meghan's smile began to fade. This wasn't the script she had expected. "I'd like to introduce our new head of aviation security and integrity," Hamilton said, turning toward the side door. "Please welcome Special Agent Crystal Cole." The door opened, and Crystal walked in. The woman who stepped through the door was the same one Meghan had humiliated just 24 hours earlier, but transformed. Gone was the casual travel attire, replaced by a tailored dark suit and the unmistakable bearing of federal authority. Her CIA credentials hung visibly around her neck. Meghan's face was drained of all color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Beside her, Tyler began to stand, looking for an exit, but found his path blocked by a security officer who had somehow materialized next to their row. The room went completely silent as Crystal walked to the podium, her eyes briefly meeting Meghan's in a gaze that communicated everything. "I warned you." "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton," Crystal began, her voice strong and steady. "For those who don't know me, I'm Special Agent Crystal Cole of the Central Intelligence Agency, Counter Drugs Division." The shock in the room was palpable. Whispers began to spread as realization dawned. Yesterday, while conducting an undercover assessment of security protocols on Flight 237, I was falsely accused of drug possession, Crystal continued. What the person who made these accusations didn't realize was that every moment of our interaction was being recorded. Crystal nodded to a technician, and the large screen behind her came to life. The high-definition footage from her tie-pin camera played for the entire room to see. It showed Meghan retrieving drugs from her personal bag, planting them in Crystal's handbag while she was in the lavatory, and then the manufactured discovery that followed. The footage continued, showing Meghan passing a package to Tyler in the galley, their whispered conversation about the drop, and other damning evidence of their smuggling operation. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Some flight attendants covered their mouths in shock. Others turned to stare at Megan, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. Crystal continued, her voice remaining professional despite the circumstances. What you're witnessing is not just a case of racial profiling and false accusation. You're seeing evidence of a drug trafficking operation that has been using commercial aviation as its distribution network, specifically targeting and framing passengers of color when they fear exposure. Tyler suddenly stood up. She made me do it. Megan said we'd never get caught. She said no one would believe. Shut up, Tyler, Megan hissed, grabbing his arm. 2 federal agents approached their row. Miss Parker, Mr. Jenkins, please come with us. As the agents led Megan and Tyler away, Crystal continued addressing the stunned audience, explaining how racial bias had been weaponized to facilitate criminal activity. Behind her, the screen showed more footage. Megan's pattern of targeting passengers of color across multiple flights, the network of accomplices throughout the airline, and the sophisticated system they had developed. As the federal agents prepared to lead Megan and Tyler out of the conference room, Megan suddenly pulled away, her face contorted with rage and desperation. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her composure completely shattered. "You can't just believe her because she has a badge. Everyone saw the video. She had drugs in her bag." Crystal remained perfectly calm at the podium. "Drugs that you planted, Miss Parker, as the video clearly shows." "That video could be faked." Megan's voice grew shriller. "You people always stick together, don't you?" The racial undertone of "you people" sent a ripple of discomfort through the room. Several employees physically recoiled from Megan's outburst. Crystal stepped away from the podium and approached Megan directly, stopping a few feet away. Her voice remained measured but carried throughout the now silent room. "Miss Parker, I've spent 15 years serving this country in ways you cannot imagine. I've faced discrimination in places far more dangerous than a first-class cabin. But in all my years of service, I've rarely encountered someone who so blatantly used racism as a tool for criminal activity." Megan's eyes darted around the room, looking for any ally, any support. She found none. "You targeted passengers based on race, believing they would be less likely to be believed if they complained," Crystal continued. "You used our society's biases as cover for your drug operation. You specifically selected me because you saw a black woman in first class and assumed I didn't belong there." "That's not true," Megan protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's not about race. I would have reported anyone suspicious." From the back of the room, another flight attendant stood up, a black woman in her mid-40s. "That's a lie, Megan," she said firmly. "You've made comments about passengers of color for years. You've questioned their first-class tickets. You've seated them away from white passengers whenever possible. We all heard you. We just didn't say anything." Other heads nodded around the room. Tyler, seeing the situation deteriorate, made a final desperate attempt to save himself. "She's the one who contacted the drug suppliers. She approached me 6 months ago, said we could make easy money. She said security never checks crew bags. It was all her idea." Megan lunged at him. "You lying." The agents quickly restrained her. "You're facing federal charges for drug trafficking, evidence tampering, filing false reports, and civil rights violations," one agent informed her. "I suggest you stop talking until you have a lawyer present." As they began to lead Megan away again, she locked eyes with Crystal one last time. "You think you've won?" Megan spat. "People will still believe my video. They'll believe what they want to believe about people like you." Crystal's expression remained composed, but her eyes held a mixture of pity and determination. "That's why people like me need to keep showing up in places people like you don't think we belong. The truth always comes out, Miss Parker, always." Megan's face crumpled as the reality of her situation finally hit her. The viral fame, the imagined promotion, the respect she thought she deserved, all gone. replaced by criminal charges, public disgrace, and years in federal prison. As the agents escorted Megan and Tyler out, CEO Richard Hamilton returned to the podium. "What we've witnessed today is deeply disturbing," he addressed the silent room. "But it also represents an opportunity for profound change within our airline and our industry." The meeting that began as a celebration of Megan's actions had transformed into something much more significant, the beginning of a reckoning. And as Crystal looked out over the stunned faces of the Atlantic Airways employees, she knew that sometimes justice required more than just catching the bad guys. Sometimes it required changing the environment that allowed them to flourish in the first place. In the days following the dramatic confrontation at Atlantic Airways headquarters, the true story spread across social media and news outlets. Megan's viral video, once celebrated as an example of vigilant security, was now being analyzed alongside Crystal's footage as a case study in racial profiling and criminal conspiracy. Megan Parker and Tyler Jenkins weren't the only ones arrested. The investigation quickly expanded, uncovering a network of 3 flight attendants across 3 airlines who had been moving drugs on domestic and international flights. Their method of targeting passengers of color for false accusations when they felt threatened had worked for over 2 years, until they targeted the wrong person. At Greatland Airways, the impact was immediate and far-reaching. CEO Richard Hamilton, to his credit, embraced the opportunity for reform rather than damage control. "What happened on our aircraft represents a failure on multiple levels," he announced at a press conference 3 days after the arrests. "Not just security protocols, but our company culture. We are committed to making this right." With Crystal's guidance, Atlantic Airways implemented a comprehensive anti-bias training program for all employees. They also overhauled their security procedures and created a passenger advocacy office specifically designed to investigate complaints of discriminatory treatment. In a private office overlooking the tarmac, Crystal sat across from a flight attendant named Yasmin Collins, a black woman who had worked for the airline for 12 years. "I wanted to thank you," Yasmin said quietly. "What happened to you on that flight? It's happened to passengers before, and when they complained, nobody believed them." "Did it ever happen to you?" Crystal asked. Yasmin nodded slowly. "Not the drug accusations, but the rest of it. The different treatment, the assumptions, the way Megan and some others would talk about certain passengers. I tried to report it once 3 years ago." "What happened?" "Nothing," they said without proof. "It was just, he said, she said." That's why your hidden camera footage was so powerful. For the first time, people couldn't deny what was happening. Crystal leaned forward. "Would you be willing to help lead the new training program? The airline needs voices like yours, people who've seen the problem from the inside." Yasmin's eyes widened. "Me, I'm just a flight attendant." "There's no just about it," Crystal replied. "You're exactly who needs to be heard." Meanwhile, in a federal holding facility, Megan Parker sat in an orange jumpsuit, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. No designer clothes, no fake smile, no pretense of superiority. Just the consequences of her actions and the long road ahead. Her lawyer had been blunt. With the video evidence, witness testimonies, and Tyler's decision to cooperate with prosecutors, she was facing a minimum of 15 years in federal prison. The drug trafficking charges alone were serious, but the civil rights violations and false accusations had added significant weight to her case. 6 months later, Crystal Cole stood at the front of a large training room at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. Before her sat 30 new air marshals, along with flight crew members from various airlines participating in a joint security program. "What you're about to see has become a textbook case in how bias can be weaponized," Crystal began, clicking to start the video. The now familiar footage of Megan planting drugs in her bag. "The passenger targeted in this video was me," she revealed to those who didn't already know. But I want you to consider how this story would have ended if I hadn't been a federal agent with a hidden camera. If I had just been an ordinary traveler. The room was silent, contemplating this reality. Every day people face assumptions, accusations, and unfair treatment based on how they look. Crystal continued. Usually there's no dramatic courtroom revelation. No justice served. Just another person who learns that the world sees them differently. She clicked to the next slide. A security photo of Megan Parker being processed into federal prison. Last week, Megan Parker was sentenced to 18 years for drug trafficking, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. Her co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. Crystal moved through the training presentation, detailing how the drug smuggling operation had worked, how racial profiling had been used as both tool and cover, and how the investigation had eventually uncovered similar schemes at 2 other airlines. The lesson here isn't just about catching criminals, she explained. It's about the systems that allow them to operate, the biases that make their schemes possible, the silence of those who see but don't speak up. In another part of the country, Great Land Airways Flight 237 prepared for departure. In the first-class cabin, a young black man settled into his seat. The lead flight attendant, Yasmin Collins, now promoted to senior cabin crew, greeted him warmly. "Welcome aboard, sir. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" The simple interaction, unremarkable in what should be normal courtesy, represented the small but meaningful changes spreading throughout the industry. Changes prompted by one incident that had exposed not just a criminal operation, but a deeper problem that had gone unaddressed for too long. In her office at Langley later that week, Crystal received a letter. It was from a flight attendant she'd never met, at an airline she hadn't investigated. "After your case went public, I started noticing things on my own flights," the letter read. "The different ways we treat different passengers, the assumptions we make. I've started speaking up now. It's not always easy, but I think about what happened to you, and I find my voice. Thank you for changing more than just one airline." Crystal smiled, adding the letter to a growing file. Sometimes, justice was about more than putting criminals behind bars. Sometimes, it was about changing the conversation. Have you ever stood up against unfair treatment when you saw it happening, or wished you had? Tell us about it in the comments. Your voice matters more than you might think. As Crystal prepared for her next assignment, she knew that one case, however high profile, wouldn't solve centuries of bias. But it had created an opening. A moment when people normally resistant to such conversations were finally listening. And sometimes, that's where real change begins. In her final report on Operation Flight Risk, Crystal concluded with words that would eventually be inscribed on the wall of the FBI Civil Rights Division. Justice is not just about punishing wrongdoing. It's about creating systems where doing right becomes the easiest choice for everyone. If this story moved you, please hit the subscribe button and share it with others, because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that make us see the world through someone else's eyes, even if just for a moment. See you in the next story.